Hey guys, today I have something incredibly exciting to share with you. We are sharing our Ascent Taipei list. Now, this might not be the exact same list. We might have made a couple of tweaks since recording this because we are going to be traveling for a week straight. So we figured to give you guys an extensive look into the deck list, we're gonna pre-record it. But we've already made so many adjustments to this. This is a very, very well-tested list. We've been making tweaks nonstop, and I'm pretty certain that this is where we are going to finalize on. So it might be exact card for card. At best, there will probably, or at worst, there will probably be one or two minor changes. Like I said, we are running this list at Taipei, recording it beforehand. So, we're gonna be posting this immediately after the tournament, and it'll either be, hey, check out what just, top 8 at Taipei, or you'll see a pinned comment from us saying, yeah, the deck isn't as good as we thought it was. So either one of those, but honestly, this is probably my favorite deck that I've played so far in Grand Archive, and I'm not sure if that's making me biased, but I do personally really think this is a strong deck. Tristan's obviously been very, very popular ever since the Recollection decks came out, but Sylvie's the only one that's been putting up results. I see so many people talking about how Sylvie is better than Tristan, and I'm hoping that this deck is going to change people's mind. So let's just jump right into it. I've already talked enough rambling in the beginning. Let's show you the cards. So we are running the Spirit of Wind. Nice little altar done by my wife Quinn. Shout out there. I love Wind as a color. I'm a big value player. Wind lets you choose between offensive and defensive sometimes. But we've only really been able to play Wind as Wind allies so far because Wind has kind of had a little bit of an identity crisis in this game. But this deck is showing off what a Wind deck can do, and I feel like shows a different version and a different side of Wind than we've ever seen before. So really, really nice to see Wind picking up some new tricks. We have level 1 Tristan. Most of the time you're going to gain the prep counter. It's very, very useful in this deck. We literally win based off prep counters. But you actually can use the agility 3 sometimes as well. I can't really give a simple tip as to when to do that. You're just going to have to feel it out and learn from practice. Tristan 2 Hired Blade. This is going to draw you a card if you have 2 or more prep counters, or if you have 4 or more, you get to draw 2 cards. You're pretty much always going to draw 2 cards. We have boots in here. We have a lot of other ways to draw prep counters, and you have defenses to survive for a few turns. So usually your play is something like go Tristan level 1, go boots, do another materialization like dagger, GCR, backup charger, something like that, and then go into your level 2 either by leveling up or dungeon guiding or something, because usually by then you'll have enough. So Tristan level 2, drawing 2 cards, obviously insane, right? And then we have the Shadow Reaver. So this is a card that I think some people are cutting from the Tristan list, and I totally get it. This does not belong in every single Tristan deck. However, it is pretty invaluable in this list. You're not going to go into it every single game, but it can be a very, very important tool. One of the best things that this can do is keep you at 25 health after you innervate. So if you go Shadow Reaver, you're going to get 4 cards from your opponent. They might be good, they may not be good, but then you level up again, you draw 2 cards so that level up's not hurting you too much. And then obviously you get all of Dancer's stuff, and then you can use things like Innervate Agility to go from a 25 health champion to a 25 health champion while healing 5 and gaining a defensive option like Stealth or Spell Shroud. So really, really strong there. And guys, this is a pretty complicated deck, so I don't have enough time to make it extremely beginner friendly, but maybe we'll do a more detailed, very long deck dive in the future. But we're gonna shoot for around the 20-minute mark on this one. So can't go too far into detail for every single card, but Shadow Dancer, your other level 3, again, you don't have to go into both level 3s each game. You can choose one or the other. This one is a crazy defensive card. You can redirect attacks, which is a pretty big part of this game. And you also get the prep counter from leveling up, which is really relevant sometimes as well. So Shadow Dancer is a pretty crucial one, and definitely the one that you'll use more often. Then we have Shadow's Claw. This card can come out for free. It doesn't take your materialization phase as long as you have 4 or more prep counters, which you're going to very easily get in this deck. So this is just a free way to get attacks, some chip damage in. It's not as important in our Tristan list as it is in other Tristan lists, but if you're doing a slightly more aggressive play, you're going to really need this, and obviously just getting 1 extra damage for free, even when you do your big swing, You know, very, very crucial. So extremely, extremely good card. Now, Windwalker Boots. This card is crazy. I was in love when this card came out in FTC. FTC gave us so many good cards that just didn't have their potential realized at that time, and this is one of them. So, like I said, you're usually going level 1, then Boots, then something else, then level 2. That's kind of your standard gameplay if you have the time to do all of that. And Boots just giving you so many prep counters because we're not really attacking early game, and then eventually turning into a GCR is unreal. Honestly, if this card read Divine Relic, I would be playing it in my deck over any other Divine Relic. I think it's actually that strong in this deck and a very, very crucial part of your material deck that you're going to go into pretty much every game. Let's talk about Poison Dagger now. This was our last inclusion into the material deck. Every other card felt extremely necessary, and this was kind of the one that I don't even remember what we took out at this point, but this came in as a kind of last thought and would definitely be the card that I could say is the most cuttable from the list if you do really want to try to fit something else in. But it does really come up when you just draw those hands or you're in the game situation where you just need to go a little bit more aggressive. You can just go, you know, turn 1 Spirit, turn 2 Poison Dagger, turn 3 Tristan, let's hit him in the face, you know, and it does work sometimes. So Poison Dagger can be pretty helpful. Then we have our actual Divine Relic, GCR. Like I said, sometimes I honestly don't even feel like I need this, which is crazy for me saying that. I know, 5 out of 5 card and all that stuff, but you know, Boots is the Divine Relic in this deck, basically. And then we have our GCR. Actually, sorry, this name is Backup Charger. Sometimes I forget because it's so freaking broken. Guys, this is one of the best cards from MRC. We've already seen this card 5x in price from release day once people started to realize just how good this is. You are very often going to have 3 cards in your hand, and so just being able to go Backup Charger, pre-rec, pop it, put 3 down from your hand into your recollection, and then you draw 1 from your deck after making a Power Cell token. It's basically GCR. It's really, really strong. I don't go into it every single game, but you always pick this over GCR if you don't need the immediate card draw and you have the 3 to pay, which, like I said, will come up pretty often. And we'll talk about why you always do that over GCR if you can later. Then we have Terrafring. We play Ensnaring Fumes in this deck, and this plus Ensnaring Fumes can act as a pseudo floodgate against some of the more, you know, spam the board with allies kind of win strategies. You'll probably still take some damage because you'll put all their resources back in their hands, so they're going to be able to play 2 to 3 allies, but it's going to stop you from getting hit from 6 or 7 allies. So really good there sometimes when you need it. And then Safeguard Amulet comes up more often than you think. I mean, every deck right now is running Terrafring and Safeguard Amulet, so I'm not going to talk about those too much. They're just basically material deck staples at the current meta. Let's talk about, quickly, I guess, the tokens. So Power Cell token, we do run automatons in here, so you can technically use this how it's intended and give something additional attack. You know, some of those times it comes up if they play a Frostworn Paladin or an Ancient Protector. They use Floating Memory with a Frostworn and they made a 4 health guy that's really presenting a problem for you. Sometimes you can just go, okay, well, Shimmer Cloak or Sable, pop the Power Cell, 4 attack, bang, kill your board. Sometimes it comes up. Most of the time, though, we run a card in our main deck as a one-of that can get more value out of the Backup Charger by doing something with this. So we'll hit into that later. And then the Ominous Shadow tokens. This is what Shadow Dancer makes. And you can do extra damage with this, or you can use it as a defensive option. It's really hard to kill off these guys because they prevent 3 damage every single time that they would take damage, and that counts for spell or attack damage. So the easiest way for your opponent to kill it is to do 7 damage in one shot with it, which doesn't come up very often. So these are usually pretty sticky. Let's go ahead and talk about the main deck now. All right, so this is the only way to play this type of Tristan deck, I feel like, and a card that people have definitely picked up on is one of Tristan's best cards is Shadow Strike. So this card is a 2-cost attack, 4 attack naturally, and then it can be prepared for an X amount, so unlimited basically. It just can't be 0. Shadow Strike will gain however many prep counters that you took off as attack damage. And the class bonus is that if it is prepared, it is unblockable, so it can't be intercepted and ignores taunt. A really important thing to note is that redirects can still happen. So Cry for Help or Tristan Shadow Dancer's effect can still pop up, which is going to, we'll talk about that. We have a way to out that later in the deck. But this is your win con. We have a couple of backup win cons, but they're a little bit more fragile and not really consistent. So this is the main way that we are going to win the game. And how do we pull that off? We play Mastermind Scheme. So this card will allow you to double your prep counters. And so Windwalker Boots, all these other ways that we gain prep counters, we basically get those out. We sit back, we play really defensive, we say, you can't kill me yet, and then we're gonna double our prep counters and hit them for like 20 plus damage at once. And it sounds wombo combo-y and inconsistent, but it is not. We have 3 incapacitates. This is a ratio that we've been messing around with a lot. We've had it at 4, 3, 2. All of them are fine. I think it basically is just meta dependent. So we are expecting a decent amount of Luxem and Merlin at Ascent Taipei. So we put it at 3 because I think there's also going to be a lot of like Sylvie and ally decks, and Incapacitate isn't as good there. So we didn't want it as a 2 of because we want a higher count against those slow decks. We didn't want it as a 4 of because we think there's going to be enough decks that is not going to be relevant for. So we're kind of playing it in the middle here at 3 just to stop your opponent from doing action cards. Very detrimental against decks like Rai and Merlin that are trying to fireball you for game, or Luxem that's trying to do a double Light Weavers and stuff like that. So also pretty good in the mirror. All right, something that a lot of Tristan players like is Slice and Dice. This I've seen as the main win con for a lot of Tristan decks. I see this as 4 of, and the deck is essentially built around it. We originally weren't running many cards of this. I mean, I've done like 10 to 20 Tristan builds so far since the set came out. And so I've run every single assassin card at 4 of at one point. But in this deck, we really didn't play that many Slice and Dices until the Sylvie matchup, the Slime matchup. It's pretty good there. It's pretty good against all the other aggro decks and stuff like that. So Slice and Dice can come up. It's also another reason why we run that Poison Dagger in the side, because if you do draw an early Slice of Dice, you have a lot of allies in your hand, you can just go, okay, I think I can rush them down. And so it's a pretty good 2 of in here. It is not your main win condition, but it can be a cheesy way to win sometimes. And you can also use it to do really good board control to help you survive. Yes, you'll give up 3 prep counters if you do decide to go after 2 targets, but you can hit something for 3 and something for 6, which is gonna basically clear almost any board. Or if you just literally wanna run it as a 2 cost 3 attack, you can. You might miss a prep counter from your boots and stuff, but sometimes you just need to stabilize the board a little bit, especially against something like wind or water allies that's not going to bring out as many allies, and just clearing 1 is pretty good. But you don't want to give up 3 prep counters to clear 2 allies, or they don't have 2 allies. Slice and Dice is pretty versatile, but definitely as a 2 of. Turbocharge. This is a card that a lot of people are underlooking, I think, right now. So Backup Charger, a lot of people have already realized how incredibly good it is, but Turbocharge is literally just another way to +1 off your Backup Charger again. So you sacrifice a Power Cell. That is the main way that we're going to use the Power Cell that we generate from Backup Charger, and you just get to draw 2 cards. So because we are a slower defensive deck, just doing this, drawing the cards off that, passing, having a bunch of leftover options for a defensive turn, means that you +1 on your last turn. Whatever Floodgate you play is going to be free, essentially. Didn't really cost you cards from hand. So really good as a 1 of. Then we have 4 Sable Remnant. So again, a card that we didn't have a lot of copies in at first, similar to Slice and Dice, but really has been pulling its weight. Sable Remnant is unbelievable. This is a very, very, very good card. And the reason is, it's a card that your opponent doesn't know what to do with. Do they kill it and give you a floating memory, which means that they're not attacking your face, they're giving you your resource back, or do they let it sit on the board and destroy their own board or put aggro onto them? So it's a really awkward card for your opponent to handle, and it's just a much better Honorable Vanguard, basically, and it just really fits in with the deck. It's also an Automaton, which does come up sometimes. Like I said, you can use that Power Cell that you got off Backup Charger to make it have 4 attack, which is crazy for it being a 2-drop. All right, and then the other ridiculous ally in here, we have 4 Sadie Blood Harvester. Again, a card that I've changed the ratio of a lot of times, and I still feel like 4 is just a little bit too many. I wish I could run 3.5 of this, if that makes sense, but obviously you can't do that. You really don't want to see multiples of these because it is a unique ally. It's Norm, and we really want a lot of wind cards and everything. but it's just so dang strong that you can't not run 4 of it. This has built-in protection, so it's a threat that you can protect no matter what's in your hand. You don't need reclaims and stuff, and it's also generating you prep counters, and it's also giving you tempo. The utility that this card brings is absolutely insane, and I could do a 10-minute video on just this card alone, so I'm just going to skip all of that and just tell you guys it's good and let you figure it out yourself. We also have 4 Dungeon Guides, so obviously very strong. Dungeon Guide's a huge staple. Running 2 level 3s, that one of them draws you a bunch of cards when you go into the next level 3, really makes you feel like 4 Dungeon Guides good, because, you know, I can't tell you how, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people feel like this. I can't tell you how many times I have 4 Dungeon Guide in a deck, and I just can't find one in time, and I finally just say, okay, I'll pay 3 from memory to go into my Merlin level 3, and then you draw a card for turn, and it's the frickin' Dungeon Guide, right? Like, that happens so many times, and it's really nice that in this deck, Dungeon Guides never feel dead, because you have 2 level 3s that you can go into, so you can level up 4 times instead of just 3 times. And then you also play Innervator Agilities, which are going to de-level you. So Dungeon Guide always feels online in this deck, which is a really fantastic thing to do. Like, this is obviously one of the best cards in the game, and having it never be a dead card is an insane thing to think about. So really good card here. All right, let's get into the Wind package, Windmill Engineer. This card is unreal. This is essentially Tactful Sergeant, but at an actual good cost. So Tactful Sergeant, 4-drop, 1/4 on enter. If your opponent attacked, or if you attack this turn, your champion attacked this turn, draw a card in memory. That card was on the watch list at one point. It has since been taken off, but it is an obviously strong effect. However, that 4 cost always felt really bad, because the cost switch from 3 to 4 is really dramatic in this game as to how it affects your turn and your tempo. So having a 2 cost that does the same thing, that instead of making your opponent or your champion attack, all you have to do is have wind cards in your hand, is unreal. It's okay that it has 1 health instead of Tactful Sergeant's 4 health. You run Reclaim, you run ways to bounce it. You don't care if it died. It only cost you 2 cards from hand to play. It doesn't have a situational, you had to do this other action in order to draw the card. This card is unreal and gets you so much value and filters. So really good card there. Then we have Sirocco Operative. Honestly, this feels like a slightly worse Windmill Engineer, but Windmill Engineer is so good that you want to run a couple extra copies of it, even if it's slightly worse. So this card's a little bit more situational. It's class bonuses that it has to draw a card into memory, so you have to have leveled up. And it can be better than Engineer. If you have an Automaton, you also get a prep counter, which I would always pay 1 extra for to get that, but it is situational. We don't run a lot of Automatons. You know, it's not as good, so that's why it's only as a 3 of in this list. And honestly, this is like one card that I might change. This is the only card in the entire list that I'm like, I kind of want to only run 2 of for Taipei. So you might see that change. That's the only thing that's in the back of the mind right now, but I do think it's good as a 3 of still. Then we have 3 Shimmercloak Assassins. So this card has felt like the absolute worst card to me so many times in my Tristan builds, but I think it actually plays a really important role. You just need a little bit more ally count in this deck sometimes. It helps with that. It helps being a stealth unit, so it's kind of like Sadie where it has a lot of built-in protection, and being an Automaton means that it's going to help turn on your operatives, and you can also use that power cell with this card if you are in a situation where you just really desperately need to deal 4 damage to something. So this card you really never want to see 2 of in your hand, ever, honestly. You really only want to see like 1 of these in a game, which is why this is at a 3 of. You'll notice a lot of the counts are a little like odd. This isn't your typical 4 of the best 15 cards in your deck. The counts are a lot of 3 ofs and everything. So a lot of those cards, if you see it as a 3 of, basically just means that you usually don't want to see multiples of it. So that's kind of the place that Shimmercloak Assassin holds. Let's talk about Korhazi Outlook. So if you're a member of our Patreon, which you can find the link below, we did a very in-depth discussion about Korhazi Outlook and how this is honestly probably the best card in the deck. This card is absolutely insane. It's over-kitted. It has been completely broken since its release in FTC, but it never had a home. It never had a deck that it really had a chance to shine. But now we actually have a strong wind deck that is not just rush allies based. And so this is a 2-drop 1/3 with an additional effect, because that's kind of where we are at with this game. Anything that's a 2-drop is usually a 1/3 stat line and does a little extra something, right? So that additional effect is on enter, put a prep counter on your champion. But then it still keeps going. It still has a class bonus, remove a prep counter, opponents can't activate cards this turn, glimpse 1, unreal that they actually put the glimpse on there too. Activate this ability only during your turn. So there's a couple of different situations. The fact that it has glimpse 1 is unreal. I can't believe that that's also on the card. It didn't need the class bonus part at all, and it also didn't need the glimpse 1. But so if you have a lot of prep counters, you've already doubled once or twice, and you're sitting at 20 plus prep counters, but you only have to deal 10 damage to your opponent with Shadow Strike or something, you can just sit there and play an Outlook and just repeatedly use this effect. It doesn't have to tap to use it or anything. You can use it as many times as you want. You can glimpse like 10. I've done it before. It's really, really good when you do that. Or the most often time that you'll play this is you play it or already have it on board or something, and you go, okay, draw for turn. I'm not going to commit to anything yet. I'm just going to use Outlook's effect, and you have to preemptively decide, do I do anything, right? So you can make your opponent use floodgates, use resources, whatever it is that they're going to do, before you do anything on your turn, and then you can adapt your strategy to what your opponent has already done. And then the best part about that is that once they have decided what they're going to do, they can't interact anymore. So they might say, you know what, I don't think you can kill me. Korhazi Outlook's fine, no response. And then you go, oh, okay, double prep, Shadow Strike, you're dead. And they might have not seen it coming, they might have not thought you could do enough damage, but they can't stop it if they want to later, they just can't. Or they do a Resolute or something like that, big Veiling or something, and you go, okay, well, I can't kill you then, but since I've done nothing on my turn outside of removing 1 prep counter, I'm just going to sit here, gain some value, play some Surveil the Winds, whatever it is, maybe play a Windmill Engineer, reclaim it, whatever, and then I'm going to pass my turn with 6 cards in hand since I didn't have to do anything to test the waters to see if you'd Resolute, and I'm going to be safe during your turn because I have all my defensive cards in, and then I'm just going to do the same thing next turn. So you can really just dwindle your opponent out of all their resources or just cheese a win because they didn't respect your turn enough. So this card is just unbelievable. This is the card that we've changed the ratio of the most between 3 and 4. But again, you really don't want to see too many of them. It kind of hurts your consistency, so we are running it as a 3 of. Again, I literally feel like I'm saying almost every single card is the best card in this deck, but Reclaim is so incredibly good in this deck. Using this with Windmill Engineer is a low tempo +1 that Wind now has access to. Engineer Reclaim is essentially the Creative Shock, discard a floating type level power play. It's only going to cost you 4 reserve cost total split between those cards, so you can do it if you're going turn 1. Heck, you can do it even if you're a Fragmented Spirit or Serene Spirit. Still, you can do it turn 1. So really, really strong, and just gets you insane pluses. You can use this with Dungeon Guides as well. Like I said, you can use Dungeon Guides so many times that using a Reclaim to pick up Dungeon Guide back in your hand can be a really good play too. Really good card in the deck. This is the card that we have felt is the worst card in the deck. Ensnaring Fumes. But it is a very necessary evil, especially if me, Terry, and Isaac do well with this deck. We post it on YouTube. It's going to get really popular. This card is the anti-Tristan card. You cannot win against Tristan without this card. There are a couple other cards that you can use as alternatives, but this is the best option. You could run the new Imbue Decree card that Zephyrs an ally and destroys a Fantasia. You could do that to remove 2 of the Ominous Shadow tokens, but if they make more than 2, then you're just not happy. But that's kind of like the next best option. But the thing is, for the Tristan Mirror, you're going to have to use Outlook, make sure that they have no interaction. Then you go, okay, well, I'm going to Ensnaring Fumes. This is going to get rid of all your Shadow tokens. Now you can't redirect with Dancer. And then now I'm going to double and Shadow Strike you, and you can't do anything about it. So very necessary evil, and you can actually use this card to gain a lot of value itself. It has Floating Memory. It is basically a 5-cost Reclaim, which is really bad, but there are games that you might have a Engineer out, an Outlook out, maybe a Sirocco Operative, and you go, all right, well, pay 5 or pay 3 prep counters and do an Ensnaring Fumes. Now I'm going to get 3 cards back into my hand that aren't really doing much. You don't really care about the 1 attack that they're contributing to on board. And then now you can just play Engineer again, play that Sirocco Operative again. Now you're drawing more cards, or I've even had turns where I went like Windmill Engineer, Dungeon Guide, level up, play Ensnaring Fumes for 3 prep counters, put those back into my hand, put the Engineer back into my memory to pay for the Dungeon Guide, and level up again, and just do a bunch of silly stuff. So you can do this as an offensive or a defensive card, but it has a lot of utility, and it's very necessary for the Tristan mirrors. We're also on 4 Surveil the Wind. This card's insane. Nothing more needs to be said about it. It is just a very strong card. And then we are on 2 Stifling Traps. Yeah, I mean, like, Surveil doesn't need an explanation. I don't mean to just say it's a strong card, trust me, and move on, but literally it's just drawing you a card and putting your prep counter on. There's no real timing to play with it. It's not good in specific matchups. You just use it when you draw it, basically. But so Stifling Trap, this is a card that we've changed the ratios on a lot. We've gone 0, 2, and 4 very frequently, and I've been very sold on running 0 in the deck, 4 in the deck. And I think this is another one of those meta call cards. We had some earlier in the deck that I was talking about. This is another one, right? So this is your counterplay, just like the Incapacitate. If you're playing against a lot of Merlins, a lot of slow decks that are really using spells to their advantage or actions to their advantage, you want to run higher of them, right? Stifling Trap is a little unique, as in, you know, it's actually really good against ally matches as well. If they try to Dream Fairy or Snow Fairy you can stop that on enter of Dream Fairy, keep your ally on board, and kill the Dream Fairy. Pretty insane. You can also just kill a Crimson Tier that's trying to attack into you and put pressure on you or something. So it actually is really good against the ally matchups. It can also be a lifesaver against Storm Slime. This deck can struggle with Sylvie, and it was actually the only matchup that did make us go off of the deck for a bit. We were really sold on this deck for Taipei, started to really grind it, and could not win the Sylvie matchup. You know, a lot of the changes that we made, like putting Slice and Dice in the main, Poison Dagger, all that stuff, also really helped. But Stifling Traps really helped to just, you know, go Innervate or like Resolute or something from the side, you know, not take lethal attack damage. But then the frustration was they always had a Storm Slam to follow up with for spell damage. So Stifling Trap, it will allow them to draw off the Storm Slam because you are going to kill it with that 2 damage. But stopping that 10 damage coming in is worth it. So, and then obviously Dungeon Guides, stopping them from leveling up, forcing them to use a materialization to pay 3 further levels or to have another Dungeon Guide. It's just going to slow them down immensely. So Stifling Traps, very good card, but you really can't run it as a 4-of just due to consistency. This deck can struggle with consistency if you start to change the ratios into different amounts. So this was the ratios in the list that we felt still had a lot of power and options and playability while not sacrificing the consistency too much. We have 4 Veiling Breeze. We are on the same exact amount of wind cards as our Nationals Wind Crux list. We are on 23 non-wind cards. So your Veilings, because this deck runs more wind cards that are cycling, like Surveils and Windmill Engineer and all that kind of stuff, you don't actually get these like 6+ damage prevention Veiling Breezes. Most often, you'll only be Veiling for 2 or 3, but it's a cheaper Resolute, essentially, is kind of how it feels to us. So still a very strong card in the deck, very defensive. Like I said, you can just go Outlook. You know, if they do something that's going to stop you from killing them, then you just go, okay, pass, and just do this huge Veiling. Another really cool interaction, I know this video is going longer than I initially intended it to. Sadie is not a once per turn, so if you are in one of those situations where sometimes you just need to put cards down to get a big Veiling, but you don't really have a lot of cards that can allow you to do that, you can go Sadie, pay 2, put it down, put it in hand, before it resolves, activate it again, and just activate it as many times as you want to in order to put down a lot of cards for Veiling and then do your Veiling for a lot. So little cool interaction that might not be obvious right away when you start playing this deck. Then we have Innervate Agility. Now we finally know why Tristan is on the artwork for this card. This card is so at home in this deck. Giving you Stealth or Spell Shroud is a big, big defensive option, but it's also always felt like it just had too much of a cost. De-leveling and recovering 5, because sometimes that can stop you as well. You have to recover 5 to play this card. But de-leveling is usually a huge deal, but with the way that the level 3s work in this deck, it actually almost is a benefit sometimes, which is insane. So very, very strong defensive option along with a Veiling there. So the last cards in this deck are 3 Fairy Whispers, which is kind of an odd count, but we also run 1 Scout the Land. So these cards are really, really similar. They're just entirely filter cards. They're not like Surveil where it's filtering and giving a little bit of value. Windmill Engineer, filtering and putting a 1/1 on board. You can reclaim it, get more value, yada yada. These are only filtering. So we had 4 Fairy Whispers, 4 Scout the Land in here at one point. We realized that's too much filter. All we are doing is filtering. We're not actually progressing our gameplay at all. So you can play with these ratios as much as you want. Maybe you go 4 Scout, no Fairy Whispers, 4 Fairy Whispers, no Scout. But I would just recommend only sticking to 4 between these 2 cards combined. So let's go ahead and move on to the side deck. All right, guys, it's a long video, so I'm going to kind of quickly go through the side deck because it's not that complicated. We have 1 Shadow Strike. This is going to put your ratio to 4 in the matchups that is needed. Surprise, 1 Scheme puts your ratio to 4. 1 Incapacitate puts your ratio to 4. And against a slower deck where you might not need the slice and dices, you know, you can't win that fast, that aggro against them, they have a lot of defenses. You just take out cards like that to help your actual big game plan and just help your ratios, basically. We have 2 Resolutes, just extra precaution against aggro. Sometimes you just need to draw the floodgates against aggro, so we put some extra ones in there. We have another Outlook, again, ratio fixer, just helps you go to 4 when there's dead cards in the main that you need to get out. Then we also have 1 Ensnaring Fumes. Like I said, this card is just so incredibly important in the Tristan mirrors. It might be overkill. I don't expect to see a lot of other Tristan players in day 2 just because it's a hard deck to build. It's a hard deck to play. We haven't heard a lot of success with it. We've seen Sylvie have a lot of success, but I don't expect to see a lot of Tristan. But if there are a couple of Tristan, this is such a vital card that we just need to have it in the sideboard. And we have 2 Zephyrs. This is just really good against like Fire Aga Lorraine. That's like making a really big sword with Hone and everything. Can help there. You can use it on your own dungeon guides to level up. Zephyr is just obviously a big utility card with Wind. It's kind of just in here as a generic good Wind card for when there's dead cards in your main that you don't want to see in that matchup. And it can just be a good Wind card to put in. We have 2 Stifling Traps for when you feel like it's relevant in the matchup. I've already talked about Stifling Trap a lot, so use your judgment on when you want to make that a 4 of. And then we have 4 Cleansing Reunion. This is the obvious anti-erupting card. You don't even need Lantern. You're just going to win with denying them their resource, their fire count in their graveyard, and just kind of outpacing them. Because Erupting doesn't really have much defenses, so that's where like Slice and Dice and Poison Dagger are going to really come up, because you'll just sit there, play a Cleansing Reunion or 2, slow them down enough turns until you say, I'm not going to do a Shadow Strike for 20, I'm just going to kill you this way, earlier, faster, and you can't stop me. So, but it's also really good against a lot of other decks, high floating memory decks, you know, water mill decks, stuff like that. Cleansing Reunion can come in more often than just against Erupting, which is why we went for a spread of that card instead of like Grail Lantern in the side or something. So guys, I know that was a long deck profile, but like I said, I'm incredibly passionate about this deck. Hopefully we did really well in Taipei and you can see the type of results that it puts up. I do firmly believe this is one of the best decks that I've ever built, and I'm really excited to see how it goes into the meta. You know, it's going to be super embarrassing if we flunked out of Taipei with this because of how much I believe in it, but I've topped every major event so far. I believe that this is going to continue that streak for me. Hopefully it did, and hopefully you guys can see Tristan is here ready to play. I know she hasn't been getting results. It's a hard deck to figure out how to deck build. It's a hard deck to play, but once you get there, it is very, very rewarding. So guys, let me know if there's any changes that you make. Let me know how the deck tests for you, and we'll see you on the channel again later. Peace.